to see about the different kind of flows we are going to see. So regarding that, we are going to see same mule standard structure. So just assume this is the source system. Okay, so this is the source system and this is the target system. I'm sending my data to, just I want to integrate this source system and target system by using MuleSoft. So for that, what we are going to do, we are designing a flows. So is this only one flow or do we have any different flows? Let's see. Okay, so here if you observe, if you search in here in the search bar flow, so here you can see two types of flow and subflow. You have two types of flows. Even in the interview also they will ask like what is the difference between the flow and subflow. Some people will ask like what is the difference between the private flow and subflow. Okay, they will call this flow as private flow also sometimes. So based on the terminology we need to understand. So private flow or flow both are same. Subflow, so mostly they will ask like what is the difference between the private flow and subflow. We'll discuss what is this private flow and what is this subflow. So first of all, I'll create a one sample application that is like mule project. I'll take mule project here, flows hyphen exam. For example, this is, just click on finish button, so it will create a one project for you. In this project, then we are going to discuss about what is the flow and what is the private flow, what is the subflow, everything we'll discuss. Okay, so it will create a one empty project for you. So in this empty project you can drag flow, so you can drag flow, so you can call it as a private flow. Okay, so you can call it as a private flow. This is a private flow, and again I'll drag this subflow. Okay, this is the subflow. So in this way we have two types of flow. One is the private flow and subflow. So if anyone asks like what is the main difference between the private flow and subflow, simply you can tell like, so private flow have source, process and error handling part. But in the subflow we don't have any source part. We have only process part. You can consider this is a process part. Okay, we don't have any source part, error handling part in the subflow. We have only process part in the subflow. That is the main two differences. What is the first difference? We don't have any source part in the subflow, but we have source part in the private flow. We don't have any error handling in a subflow. We have error handling in a private flow. So I'll tell you what is the usage of this error handling and everything we'll discuss. Okay. So first of all, this is the private flow and subflow. Why we need to use this? So for example, I'll take again flow. I will consider this is as a main flow. Okay. So when this private flow will become main flow, so if you place any type of connector in a source level like HTTP listener, database, any kind of JMS, if you placed any connector in the source level, you can consider that flow as a main flow. So it is an unofficial flow. Okay, we don't have this kind of main flows directly available in your palette. So you can consider this is only your assumption for your understanding. Okay, so this is the main flow. So now you can consider this is the main flow, this is the private flow, this is the subflow. So when we can use this private flow and subflow, I'll tell you. Okay, so first of all, I'll configure this main flow. How you can configure? Simply click on plus button, click on OK button. That's it. And here you'll give some path. Okay, so here private data, I want private data. So don't give any spaces in between the path. Remove the space and give the camel case. This is the camel case you can give. Okay, so now your configuration is ready for the main flow. And here I have some set payload. Okay, I have some set payload here and here. Okay. So first of all, what is the purpose of this private flow and subflow means? For example, you have n number of components in the flow. Like for example, you have almost 20 components. Okay. So 20 components you have within the flow. So instead of maintaining like many components in a single flow, we can split all these components in a individual flows. Okay. So we can call it as a private flow and subflow. Even you can maintain this reusability code. Okay, for example, this code I have. So in this way I have 20 components I have. Okay, 20 components I have. Something kind of other components also some places. Okay, these are all the components we have. Okay. Here you can see there's a lot of there's a big flow you can see, right? So instead of maintaining all these components, you can split this flow. For example, I want to maintain these 4 components in a some kind of a private flow or subflow I can maintain. How can I maintain? Simply I'll drag all this code, okay, all this reusable code here. Okay, in this way I can drag all my code here. Okay, so here I can assume this is also part of the main flow only. But here, for example, in between I have 5 components. That 5 components I have moved to this private flow. Simply I can call this private flow by using the flow reference. Okay, if you go to the favorites here, you can see flow reference. By using flow reference, I can call this private flow. How can I call this private flow by using flow reference? So here in the drop down you can select the flow name. So if you want to call the private flow, you have to select the private flow. If you want to call subflow, you can select the subflow. Okay, so I want to call the private flow. Now let's see. So first the execution will start, and here you can assume these 5 components. Instead of 5 components, I have placed one flow reference. I'm maintaining all these 5 components in a private flow. I'm calling by using the flow reference. So now you can assume this private flow code also. So inside this main flow only. So but I'm maintaining separately for the code reusability and maintenance. Okay, so maintenance means instead of maintaining all the components in a single code, just I'm splitting that code into a different flows like private flows or subflows. Even same code you can maintain in the subflow also, and you can call the subflow here. Okay, and I want to maintain remaining 3 components. These 3 components I want to maintain in a subflow. Directly also you can do it. So how you can do it, I'll show you. Okay, so for example, these 3 components I want to move to this subflow. How can I move? Let me show you. Okay, so select the 3 components by pressing control. Okay, control, select the 3 components and right click, extract. Here you can see extract to subflow. Okay, already subflow is there, right? So subflow, let's see, subflow, and click on OK. Subflow already, please enter another one flow name. I think okay, it is not possible. So directly manually you can drag and drop all these 3 components inside this subflow. Okay, now here I'm calling these components, subflow components, by using flow reference again. How can I call these 4 components? By using the flow reference. So in the flow reference here, like for the flow name field, you have to select the flow name. So here if I select the private flow, again it will call the private flow. But my code is available in subflow, right? Just I am selecting subflow. Now let's see. Now here you are calling this private flow, and once this all components execute, again the thread will come back to the main flow. Then it will come here. It will execute Then it will call the subflow. It will execute all the components. Finally, it will come to main flow. Okay. In this way, your flows will call from the main flow. So the main purpose is like if you have like a large size of flow, so you can split into a flows like private flows or subflows. You can call by using the flow reference from the main flow. Here you may ask like we can use only private flows or we can use only subflows. Why? Because both are the reusable purpose only, right? So for example, okay, but why we are using private flow and subflow? Here you can see one difference. For example, here if you call your flow, okay, if you are say, like extracting your all components into the private flow, if you got any errors in this one of the component, you can handle your errors in the private flow itself. Why? Because private flow have error handling, right? So if you got any error occurred in the private flow, you can handle your errors in a private flow itself. But in the subflow, you don't have any error handling mechanism. So if you got any error occurred in the subflow, so we cannot handle our errors in a subflow. So then what it will do? It will propagate that error to the main flow. So in the main flow, here we are calling subflow, right? So it will come here. If we raise any error occurred here, we don't have any error handling part here. So then it will propagate that error to the main flow. In the main flow, we have error handling, right? So this error handling, so this subflow will utilize this error handling part, main flow error handling part, it will utilize. So for that, it will propagate that error to the main flow. In the main flow, we can handle that errors by using the error handling section. So in this way, we can use the private flow and subflow. Even I can tell you one more thing also. If you extract this component into this flow, even you can reuse these components multiple times. How you can reuse this multiple times? For example, I want to call this all 5 components in a starting level. How can I call? Simply I'll drag one flow reference here. I can call the private flow. Here I can call the private flow. So now the flow execution will first it will come here. It will go to the private flow. It will execute all these 5 components. Again it will come to the main flow. Here again it will go to the private flow. It will execute all these 5 components. It will come to the main flow. In the last flow reference, it will call the subflow. So it will execute these 4 components. It will come back here. Finally, it will execute the main flow. In this way, the flow execution will be like this. This is all about synchronous. Nothing but everything will execute in a single thread. First one thread will create. That thread will go to the private flow and it will complete all these 5 components. Again, that thread will come to the main flow. Again, here if we are calling private flow or subflow, it will go to that flow on a same thread. Okay. So even so until execute these 5 components, this flow reference will wait. So immediately it will not execute this logger. So component by component. Why? Because here in between we are calling some other flows, right? So it will wait until complete that private flow execution. Again it will come back to the same thread and that thread will execute this logger. So if you can create a multiple threads, one thread you can execute this flow and one thread you can execute the private flow, that is asynchronous. We'll discuss that asynchronous later. Okay, so as of now we'll discuss only synchronous. Okay, as of now we can discuss only about the synchronous. Yeah, in this way we can define all the private flows and subflows. Let's see one use case or one example, so then you can understand very well. Okay, so first of all, here I will first of all I'll remove all these components. Let's see how we can discuss, how we can understand this. We'll see. Okay, I'll remove all the components. I don't want any components. Okay, so even here also I don't want any component, just one set payload and one logger is enough. Okay, so what is the set payload? Here I'll write this is private flow. Okay, this is private flow. And This is subflow. One set payload is enough for me. Okay, this is subflow. Subflow. And here also I'll place one logger, and in this logger I'll print the payload. Same in the private flow itself, I'll drag one logger. I want to print this payload. Whatever you have payload in the set payload, this payload I want to print inside logger. And last thing is like this is the main flow, right? So here I will write main flow message. Okay. This is main flow. And here also I'll print this payload. So can anyone tell me, like, if I deploy this application and test this application from the Postman, so what is the message I'll get from the Postman? Can anyone tell me?
Yeah, logger will print.
Logger will print always in a console. Okay. So in the Postman payload, it will return. So which payload it will return? So main flow payload or private flow payload or subflow payload?
Main flow payload anna.
So can you explain me why it will return the main flow payload? Why it will not return the private flow and subflow payload?
ఎందుకంటే మనం అక్కడ ఇవ్వలేదు కదా అదన్నా ఫ్లో రిఫరెన్స్ ఇవ్వలేదు కదా, సో అదే మెయిన్ కాబట్టి అక్కడి నుంచి అది తీసుకుంటుంది అనుకుంటున్నాను.
So why it is only executing? Why it is not executing? I'm asking that thing. Okay. So another okay. So here flow reference ఇవ్వలేదు కాబట్టి, so then it will not print అంటున్నాం. సో ఫస్ట్ ఇది అసలు ఎందుకు ఎగ్జిక్యూట్ అవ్వాలి? ఫస్ట్ వై ఇట్స్ ఎగ్జిక్యూట్ ఫస్ట్?
ఇక్కడ లిజనర్ లేదు కదా నా స్టార్టింగ్ లో ప్రైవేట్ ఫ్లోలో.
yes exactly. So here if you observe, okay, so good answer, good observation. Okay, so if you observe here in the main flow and private flow, you don't have any source connector, right? So here you don't have any listener. So what this HTTP listener will do, it will listen the request from the Postman or any browser. Okay, it will listen the request from Postman or any browser. So here I don't have any listener. So then how it will listen the request from the Postman? If I sending any request, it will not listen, right? So that's why always in this scenario, in these three flows, always main flow will execute first. Okay, so this set payload is using for setting the content. So I want to set some message, I want to set some content to the flow. So for that I'm using set payload. I'm setting that content anyway, but I want to print and I want to check whether it is setting properly or not. How can I check? How can I print? By using logger I can print. So where can I print this message? So in the console I can print that message. If you want to see this console, here you can see a lot of deployment logs. These are the deployment logs. You can clear all these deployment logs. I don't want to see all these deployment logs. Only loggers I want to check, right? So let's see now. If I trigger this flow, okay, if I trigger this flow from main flow, so by using this path, let's see what will happen. So this is my path. If I am sending the request, so what will we get? So this is the main flow. Main flow payload we will get. Okay, already I have told you, right? Whatever you have payload in a end of the flow, that payload only it will return to the browser. What payload I have? Main flow payload. Okay, this is the main flow payload I have. So this it will return to the browser, nothing but to the Postman response. As part of response, we are getting this message. Now in this way it will execute. If I call, okay, even in the console also you can check whether it is printed or not. How you how you can check? Here you can go to end of the line. Here you can see logger message processor. So this is the main flow. So what we configured in the logger, So we have configured payload. So here, what is the meaning of payload? Whatever you are setting some content to the payload, that payload it will print into the logger directly. So what you set into the payload, this is the main flow. Same thing, it will print in a logger where you can check in the console. You can check logger message processor. This is main flow. Even if I trigger one more time, what will happen? So again one more request will come. This payload, again this payload will print by using the logger. Here you can see logger message 2 times it is printed. If you send, it will print one more time. In that way this flow will work. Okay, so now I want to call this private flow from the main flow. Means nothing but I want to reuse this. Okay, I want to reuse this code in a main flow. I want to use this code in a main flow. How can I use? Simply by using flow reference I can call, right? So let's see what will happen. Okay, so here how can I call this private flow? So here by selecting the private flow in the drop down, you can call the private flow. Even if you want to check also, how you can check? First, right click on this flow reference, go to reference flow. If you click on this go to reference flow, automatically the cursor will move to this private flow. So whatever you have configured inside flow reference, it will go to that cursor to that particular flow. Even directly you can press F3 also in your keyboard. Okay, then also it will go. So if you click on this go to reference flow, yeah, now you can see it is highlighted this private flow, right? You can see the double lines. So in this way it will show like which flow it is representing also. Okay, for example, here if I select this subflow, so if you execute same thing, go to reference flow, it is highlighting subflow. That way you can check like which flow we are referring also. By seeing this default name you are not able to understand, right? So you can call it as a display name also. If I want to change this display name, how can I change? I'm calling private flow. How I can change the display name? Control C, and here you can paste Control V. So if you change this display name, this flow reference, this display name also will change. Now you can see by seeing this you can easily understand this flow reference will call the private flow. Okay, after that, so let anyone tell me like, so what is the payload we are getting, like main flow payload or private flow payload? Anyone? Any guesses, guys? So which payload will get, main flow payload or private flow payload?
Yeah,
Private
private flow.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, that's correct actually. So even if if you're not able to tell, you can ping also. Okay, you can type in the chat also. If you know the answer, you can type. Even if that is wrong also, just guess and type into the chat. Okay, so then I can understand what you are able to understand. Okay, so most of the people are telling private flow payload, right? Let's see. It will return the main flow payload or private flow payload. Okay, if I send this request, it is returning private flow payload. So I'm not able to understand actually. It's like how it will work, and I'm not able to understand. If I want to see how this flow is executing step by step, if I want to see, so this in this way we should not do in this way. Okay, so for that we need to run in a debug mode, so then you can understand very clearly. So I'll tell you how you can run this flow in a debug mode. Okay, let's see how you can run. First, to stop this flow execution, just right click, debug mode. Okay, debug project flow example. You can run in a normal mode and debug mode also. So here you can see these two modes actually. So this is the debug mode, this is the normal mode, right? So if you run in a debug mode, automatically it will shift into this debug mode. I'll show you how it will shift. So now I'm running in a debug mode, my application, and from wherever you want to execute component by component. Okay, processor by processor if you want to execute. Okay, for that you need to add the breakpoint here. Okay, I'll show you how to add the breakpoint as well. So for that, first of all, it is asking like I want to switch to the debug mode. So you need to allow that S. If you click on S, so it is converted into a debug mode. Now you can see, so it will execute component by component in a debug mode. Even you can keep the debug point also, nothing but breakpoint you can keep. So breakpoint means, so previously if I triggered, automatically I'm getting response, right? This time you will not get any response directly. First the flow will come here, it will execute component by component, then once it is completed all the components, then only you will get the response in a browser. Let's see how we can execute in a debug mode. Even here you can see this debug mode is highlighted, right? So this is not highlighted, this is normal mode, this is the debug mode. Let's see how we can test. So previously if I triggered, immediately I'm getting response, right? But this time you will not get response immediately. Here you can see sending request. So still it is sending the request. Where this request is going, this request is stopped here. So nothing but this request is not completed yet. So even you can check, so internally what this flow contains, like which payload it is contains, everything you can check here. Presently I don't have any payload here. Once it is crossed this, this cursor is crossed this component, now you can see like what payload we have. So if you want to execute manually, you have to click on F6 button in your laptop, otherwise just directly click on this next processor button. Okay, F6, there you can see, right? So now it will come here. You can see what is my payload now. This is the payload. You can see this is main flow, this is my payload. Okay, so even as of now I'll clear all this console. I don't have anything in the console. So if I cross this cursor like from this logger component, then this logger will print, otherwise this logger will not print. Whenever this cursor will cross to the components, then only the component will execute. If I trigger the F6, now you can see logger is printed. What is my logger? This is the main flow. If I click on F6, it will go to the private flow. Why? Because I'm calling the private flow from the main flow. So that's why it is going to the private flow. So you can see how it is executing component by component. Click on F6. So whenever, now you can see payload is changed, right? So my payload is changed. This is the private flow payload. Same payload you can see in a logger also. F6, now you can see. So in this logger it is printed, this is the private flow, this is the main flow. Finally you got the response. Finally you got the response to the browser. Execution completed. Okay. Just again I want to go to the normal mode. How can I go to the normal mode? Just click on the mule design here, then came back to the normal mode. So here I will place one more logger. So nothing but I will return like private flow completed. Okay, completed. So here I'm not printing any payload. So in this logger I'm printing payload, in this logger I'm printing payload, but here I'm printing some message, just customized message I'm printing. So for just for checking purpose. Okay. So here I can print. After that I will call the subflow. How can I call the subflow? It is very easy. In the flow name section, in the drop down, you can select the subflow, and same thing you can mention as a display name. Now let's see. So this is the final logger. Okay, this is the final logger. Otherwise, final response. So this is also customized message. Along with message, I want to print the payload as well. Like I want to check in the loggers itself. In a last payload, in the end of the flow, which data I have, I want to check by using this logger. Okay, so that's why final response I want to print here payload. How can I print? If you press control space, okay, if you press control space, then it will show the options. So this syntax you have to select. Hash square braces, within the hash square braces you have to write the payload. So then it will print this customized message as well as the payload also. If you want to print only customized message, you can remove this payload in this way. Okay, you can print only customized message. If you want to print this if you don't want to print this customized message, I want to print only payload. So then here you can directly write the payload here. So then it will not print any customized message. In this way, you can write loggers in a multiple ways. Let's see how this will work. Okay, I am saving this. Again, it will convert into a debug mode. Why? Because still I am running in a debug mode, right? So can anyone guess, like, if I triggered what the payload I will get here? So main flow payload, private flow payload, or subflow payload? Any guesses, guys?
Yeah, subflow payload will get.
Any other guesses, guys? I'll consider all your responses. Okay. Any other guesses? Hello. Yeah, subflow, high process is still in subflow. Okay. Yeah, most of the people are telling, I think, subflow only. Let's see what is the response we are getting. So how this flow will execute internally also, we'll check component by component. So it is asking for running in debug mode. I'm clicking on S. So then the cursor will come here. Now you can check there is no payload. Set payload means empty payload. I don't have any payload here. Even you can check here. Empty payload I have. If I click on F6, then it will go to the logger. Even now you can check. This content is set. Okay, so main flow payload content is set to this payload. Now you can check my payload is main flow. I want to clear all the logs. Okay, where can I clear? In the console, I can clear all the logs. Okay. Let's see how these loggers will print. I have cleared everything. If I triggered F6, then this cursor will cross the logger, then that logger will print in the console. You can check. So as of now, what is my payload? This is main flow. Main flow payload I have. Nothing but this set payload data I have in the payload section. So whenever it will go to the private flow, so then still I have main flow payload only. Whenever this cursor will cross the set payload, then only this private flow payload will set. Okay, so this is the private flow payload set. So after that, second logger also will print. Now you can see this is the private flow. Again the cursor will come here. So what we have written in this logger, so if you open this logger, you can see private flow completed. Okay, so again I am going to the console. If I click on F6 button, now you can see, so first it came to the main flow, after that it is going to the private flow, after that again it is coming back to the main flow and it is printed private flow completed. So by seeing this you can easily understand actually. So first it is printed in a main flow, it is going to the private flow, after that it is completed the private flow. Again it is going back to the subflow. Okay, and in the subflow it is printed the subflow logger. What is the subflow logger? This is the subflow. Again it is coming to the main flow. In the main flow, in this logger, this is the final logger, right? Final response. What we have final response, you can check here itself. You don't need to go check in the response in the browser itself. Okay, so in the last logger, what you have printed payload, that payload only will return to the browser. That you can understand here. Okay, if I click on F6, final response. What is my final response? This is subflow. This payload only it will return to the browser. Okay, the final response, I'm printing payload. Here I can see this is the payload I'm printing. Same payload you can see in the browser itself. This is a subflow. In this way, you can process your all the payloads through the multiple subflows and private flows by using like on single thread. Okay, so by using flow reference, we can call the private flows and subflows anyway. Again, I'm coming back to the main designing mode. So now from the like debug mode to design mode, I came. So I want to tell you only one thing is like, so it will all the things execute in a single thread, and finally in the end of the flow, what payload you have, that payload only it will return to the browser. Okay, This thing you have to remember always. Okay, like in your entire MuleSoft career, you have to remember this point. So whatever payload is available in the end of the flow, that payload only will return to the browser. So here you can understand, first you can set the main flow payload. After that, that payload, it is setting private flow payload. So here you can understand only one thing is like every time the payload is overriding by the old payload. So here new payload is overriding by the nothing but private flow payload is overriding by the main flow payload. Subflow payload is overriding by the private flow payload. Finally, I have subflow payload in the end of the flow. So that's why it is returning that subflow payload to the browser. So can anyone tell me like what is the response now? Can anyone tell me? So I'll remove this breakpoint. So then it will stop here. Okay, directly it will execute complete things. Let me know like what is the response.
Private flow payload will print.
Okay, private flow payload will print in a browser, right? So here I'll clear the console. Even now also if you want to execute debug mode, you can execute anyway. I'll send the request. Now you can understand very clearly. First here you can see sending. Now it is setting main flow payload, printing main flow payload. Even loggers also you can check main flow payload, it is printing. It is going to the subflow now. Why? Because here I'm calling the subflow, right? So that's why it is going to the subflow, not private flow. It is printing the subflow logger. Again it is coming back here. Here it is printing like private flow completed, but here you need to change this logger. Subflow completed, you need to change. Now it is going to the private flow. It is completed private flow. Nothing but here you can see my payload is changed here and it is printing into the logger. This is the private flow. It is coming to the main flow and final response. Here which payload it is printing we can see here. Okay, if I click on F6, this is the private flow payload. Nothing but private flow payload, it is printing in a end of the logger. So then you can easily understand this payload only will return to the browser. Even in the browser also you can check. If you remove this breakpoint, then you can easily understand. Like why? Because if I send the request, immediately I'll get the response. Send the request, immediately I'll get the response. Okay. So in this way, you can execute all your private flows and subflows in a different ways. Okay, that's it guys. That's it for today. Thank you. Okay, I'll stop the recording.